Hello, ladies and gentlemen. RAADFest day 1 is over, and it was a very full day with loads of new things that were shared by all the experts that have been there, but I cannot share everything with you. This is why you might want to join still. But there are 3 things I do want to share with you. So the first one is about bones and bone mass, and the second one is about senolytics, senescent cells, zombie cells, and third, and certainly not last, is all about sexual health. So, number 1, bone health. So, I've decided to title this Losing Bone Mass, Losing Healthy Years. And this was something that Kyle Zagrodzky from OsteoStrong was talking about. And one of the things that he was, for instance, sharing is, yes, of course, you do want to move with ease. You want to move with confidence. You want to be able to pick up things. You want to pick up your grandchildren, great-grandchildren. You want to pick up your shopping, carry it around. Everything with ease and at any age. But unfortunately, your bone mass actually peaks at the age of 30. Afterwards, it's a little bit of a downward spiral that accelerates our aging, unfortunately, as with so many things. But what was actually most shocking for me is 1 in 2 women, so either you or me, will have a fracture after the age of 50. 50%. That is quite dramatic. And the problem is that it's still not all. Alone bone mass, like weak bones, have also been correlated in studies with type 2 diabetes, with Alzheimer's. And of course, as you can assume, strong bones are also related to strong muscles. So you need both to work together. Otherwise, your body won't be functioning very well. So what can you do? Well, strength training, pretty easy. Yeah, that was it. Now, so strength training, yes, it is super important. And one of the basics for that is actually taking vitamin D or having sufficient levels of vitamin D, vitamin K, and also calcium in your body so that your body can actually build those strong bones. And they actually, in the research that Kyle has introduced, he was showing that helped to actually improve the bone mass density a little bit when done together with strength training. And that's where the problem comes in, really. A lot of us, we can't just go out and do super heavy lifting because we need somebody who supervises us, and even then our joints might not go along, or we might just do things wrong and then actually do more damage than we actually do good. And even if we do that, the increase in bone density is relatively minimal. Yes, you do increase bone mass, which is a good thing, but it might just not be enough. So he was introducing his company OsteoStrong, and they have different machines, and they're in different places around the world where, like, in 10 minutes a week, you get very focused training for specific bones, and they have shown that it can actually increase your bone mass density by 290% over, I think it was a year. So that is very significant. But most of us don't have a studio at home or close to us. So what can we do? Of course, as I mentioned already, vitamin D, vitamin K, calcium, take that. Or make sure that you have good levels of that so that your body can actually utilize it to building bone. And if you have not started yet, do strength training. It doesn't, in my opinion, any strength training is better than no strength training. And a lot of the research has shown that as well. Like if you look at, and you have that in your neighborhood for sure, you have people who are chronologically old, but who are actually full of life and who seem to have a lot of strength. And yes, they're doing that all the time. So keeping your body strong your whole life long is really what's important. And it's never too late to start again. You might need a bit more help to get started, to know how to do it well, because you do not want to do damage. One of my personal favorites is doing kettlebell, because it is strength training and actually aerobic training combined. So I personally like that. So, oh, by the way, there was one app. He also introduced an app called Fracture Proof. So Fracture Proof. That actually helps you, like you basically hold it against your hip and then you jump, for instance, from different things, and then you it seems to measure how strong your bones are. So it's one way to look at it, but I think just doing some strength training is what will be a good first step. Number 2, don't let those zombie cells get you. So here I'm talking a little bit about what Dr. Joe Cleaver shared in his presentation. And you do want to live healthy longer, right? But you're exhausting your cells. And then that's just by living. You're exhausting your cells. That's just the way it happens. The problem is that, like, after a while, those cells stop functioning, but they don't want to die. So these are those senescent, or also called zombie cells, that cause a lot of havoc in your body, and then just they basically involve everybody around, all the other cells, and it's like they all take them into this downward spiral of aging that we actually want to avoid, right? So what are some of the aspects that actually lead to accelerated senescence? And that can be, for instance, and it's something we have probably not looked at enough so far. So it was very interesting to hear that. He was talking, for instance, that things like mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's like if your powerhouses in your cells don't work properly, then senescence is much more likely, which is quite logical. Telomere attrition, DNA damage, etc. These are all things that actually can accelerate senescence. And that then can lead to stem cell exhaustion, and you need those stem cells to replenish your other cells and to heal, etc. And it can, of course, as you all know, it can lead to chronic inflammation. And all that then leads to plenty of aging-related diseases. Starting from simple things like skin aging and hair loss. No, we don't want that, but that's that's just simple stuff that's not as damaging. But then it all goes all the way to, frailty, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancers, etc. Not so good. So we do want to avoid it. So we really need to do something about senescent cells. But so far, we have primarily been talking about removing those senescent cells. That was a topic that was the prime one over the last years. But if mitochondria don't work well, if your telomeres get shorter, if your stem cells, or in general, your cells are not functioning very well, removing those senescent cells might not be enough. Or maybe, there are ways where you can remove a lot of them, and maybe that might be too much. And then you actually hinder your body to heal wounds, etc. So you need a fine balance. You probably know that from stress. It's like, it's good to have a little bit of stress. That gets you going. But if you have too much, everything goes downward. And that's quite similar with senescent cells. So you need a few, but you don't want to have too many. So what Joe Cleaver recommended is basically a 3-step approach to dealing with senescent cells. So one is preventing them in the first place. And that goes back to healthy lifestyle. It's, eat good food, like get all the nutrients, move during the day, fitness, etc. He also specifically recommended curcumin. He recommended boosting NAD+, resveratrol he mentioned. He also mentioned telomerase activators, so something that actually lengthens your telomeres again. And he also mentioned copper peptide. And again, copper peptide is something that's popping up everywhere for probably the last year or two, probably the last 2 years. There might be something interesting that you might want to look into. So that can help you potentially prevent senescence. But then you want to also inhibit those cell senescence really in the that is happening too much. And one of the ways that he suggested is metformin. We've been talking about that a lot already over the last years, but he also suggested rapamycin. And that is really at the moment the darling of the anti-aging field, of anti-aging doctors, of functional medicine, of preventative medicine. A lot of people are taking rapamycin, which originally had been actually used or recommended for people who had gotten an organ transplant, so that the immune system was basically lowered down so that it doesn't reject the organ. But as actually Dr. Matt Kevelain later on said, it's actually probably not an immune suppressing molecule. It might actually be rather one that modulates your immune system, so which is a very, very different thing. And there are a lot of studies going on. Unfortunately, rapamycin is not cheap. Well, A, you need to find a doctor to actually prescribe it to you, and B, it is quite expensive, even at the relatively low doses that we seem to need is a different question, but that most people who are taking it actually taking. So, but then prevention, then inhibiting cell senescence, and then senolytics. That's where senolytics come in. That's what we have been talking about over the last years already. And there are things like fisetin, quercetin. He was mentioning an experimental peptide, FOXO4-DRI. He was again mentioning rapamycin, and for mitochondrial improvement, if you want, he was also talking about MOTS-C, so MOTS-C, and also, and that's again something we've been talking about in the biohacking, biofinesse world for a few years, methylene blue. You choose which one works best for you, or what approach is best for you. You do know that, like, the more you age, the more likely this is that you gather more of those senescent, of those zombie cells. So you might need to work more on the senolytic side as you age. But do never ever forget to actually look into it and do something about prevention and inhibiting those senescent cells in the first place. Topic 3, sexual health. And I like the quote that Dr. Amy Killen had used, which actually comes from a poet, Charles Bukowski. So she said, sex is kicking death in the ass while singing. And isn't that in a way what we want? You know, we want to enjoy our life having sex, and if we can use sex to actually live healthier longer, hey, that's great, right? So we're all winning. So the problem though is that Mother Nature is not too keen for us to actually keep going for too long, to reproduce for too long. So she's kind of stopping our enjoyment by really bringing things like, like pain, dryness, then also inflammation, maybe even stress, incontinence. None of that is fun. So what can we do about that? Thankfully, we have some doctors, some wonderful doctors, some women, Dr. Sandra Kaufman and Dr. Amy Killen, who I've already mentioned, who were sharing some of their best tips on how to A, make it more fun, but B, also how to actually keep our reproductive age longer, to postpone menopause if you haven't been in menopause yet, but in general also to really keep your overall sex life and sex organs much healthier, and with that also our overall health and longevity. So let's start with some of the tips that Dr. Amy Killen mentioned. So one of the things that she really focused on was keep your stem cells healthy, and really important, help your body to keep making nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is very important for blood flow, for sexual arousal. And the problem though is when you're in your 20s and you're producing like 100%, everything is great, everything works well, but already in your 40s, your body is only making about 50%, only about half of that. And that drops to just about 15% at about age of 60. That's not great. Thankfully, you can do something about it. And it really starts, I have to come back to that, it's always the same. A good diet and a good fitness regime, good exercise regime. But there is more. So she also recommended sunlight. She recommended infrared, red light and infrared light. So for instance, if you have an infrared sauna, you can use that. Or if you have lights, you can use them. She also recommended pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, so PEMF. You might have heard about that it's very good. And as I was talking a little bit about the food, she recommends nitrate-rich foods, including, for instance, beans, greens, and citrus. What she says you should avoid is actually an antiseptic mouthwash. So do not take antiseptic mouthwashes. That's not good for your nitric oxide production. Other suggestions she mentioned was using basically doing hyperbaric oxygen. So like going, for instance, into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber if you have the opportunity. Using sound therapy, and no, I'm not talking about singing to your vagina or singing to your penis or to a penis. No, it's actually about shockwave therapy, but it is sound therapy. So, and one that I am very curious about and that I do want to explore a little bit deeper from my side is bioelectricity. So I want to learn more about that one, and maybe you do want to do that too. And of course, we cannot forget peptides. I only want to really mention one of the peptides she mentioned, and that's PT141, because that helps with libido and arousal. Let's look at our anti-aging supplement queen, Dr. Sandra Kaufman. What did she find? What supplements can help us to be sexually, let's say, more interested, but also actually keep our sexual organs in much better health? So I'm focusing here on the women's one, even though some of them, they can also help the men, but I'm focusing on the women here. Sorry, guys. So she mentioned, for instance, resveratrol. We all know resveratrol. It has so many benefits. So resveratrol, for instance, she said there are studies that show that it helps with vaginal dryness and also with other sexual problems. She mentioned NMN or NR, so nicotinamide riboside, astaxanthin, her favorite, and Centella asiatica. All three actually improve your eggs. And then she also mentioned, last but not least, curcumin, which can actually delay ovarian aging. So this is a summary of day 1. I wish you all the best, and maybe I see you on day 2 or day 3 of RAADFest 2021.